Hello, everyone. My name is Kent C. Dodds, and I am super excited to be joined by my friend Artem Zarkanchenko. Did I get that
Oh,
right?
yeah, it was okay.
Okay, good. Cool. So Artem and I don't go back super far. Just this year is when I ran into Artem, and it was through his project MSW, which we're going to be talking about a lot. And I was just blown away by how powerful and useful this was. And anybody who's gone through the Epic React material, or if you're going to, like you're watching these first and then you're going to go through it, eventually you're going to run into MSW on the edges. And this is, well, actually, no, we talked specifically about testing with MSW as well. So yeah, you'll get some exposure to MSW, and this is the person who created it. So with that, I'd love to get to know you a little bit. So you can tell us like really anything about yourself, where you work, and what your cat's name is, whatever you want to, whatever you want to say.
Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Artem. I'm a software engineer. I'm from a little town in Ukraine called Poltava, and yeah, I've been working as a software engineer for about 4 or 5 years. I originally graduated like a medical doctor in Ukraine, but then my life took an unexpected turn, and here I am, writing software for people. Yep.
That blows my mind as a medical doctor, background education. I don't know what it's like in Ukraine for getting a like being a medical doctor, but like I have a friend who literally just a few weeks ago finally finished all of his schooling and everything, after like years of going through this, and now he's finally an actual for reals doctor. So like did, what was that like, and how do you feel like kind of leaving that all behind to go totally switch careers?
Well, in Ukraine, I guess it's a little bit different. It takes about 5 years to study, and then from 2 to more years to get like qualification on your profession.
It's
So
a long
it's not,
time though.
yeah, it's not as long as in America. I heard people studying there for like decades. I don't know.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, it's been all right. Like I still think that it's one of the best educations there is, and I'm super thankful. Like I can't imagine it being more fun and cool, honestly, studying something else. So it's
That's
not
cool.
like I didn't switch from it because I didn't like it or something. It just I like to do more stuff. So it turned out that I don't know, people needed me for software more than they needed me for doctorship. So it's all right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you ever plan on going back to being a medical doctor?
Well, I don't like to close myself to possibilities. So maybe, but at the same time, I'm realistic that everything is practice. So perhaps that's not that likely, but it's nice to know that there is a chance. Well,
Yeah, well, that's cool. So you got into software, and at some point you decided that the way that we mock out HTTP requests could be improved. So I'll tell you my story of how I found MSW first, and then I'd love to hear like the background story on MSW. So I found MSW specifically for Epic React. I was trying to find a way that I could make an application that didn't require a huge amount of setup on the part of the workshop attendees, because I've done many workshops. One of the earliest that I did was a testing workshop on the Node side, and I wanted to have like a MongoDB and like actual endpoints and everything. And the amount of time that I spent making sure that everybody could get everything installed and it would actually work was just like astronomical. And that didn't even work because I had to like say, okay, go and install Mongo. And that was just like such a huge ask for a lot of people. And now like maybe Docker could help me with some of that little bit. Back then, Docker wasn't quite as well known. I certainly didn't know how to use it. And so like yeah, maybe containerizing that could have helped a little bit, but I'd been burned before, so I wanted something that was really, really simple, and like didn't require any more additional installation beyond just npm install. And so but at the same time, like I kind of hacked together my own solution where I just said window.fetch equals, you know, my own little thing. And so I'd hijack that. And then it's like, oh no, and now I'm not actually making network requests. So if I try to tell them, go look at the network tab, well, it's not going to be there. And so that was a bummer. And so I would do like a console logs and, you know, console groups so that everything, you know, you could see those requests at least. But it just felt like, okay, I'm trying to teach you how to build a realistic application without all the complexities of a real backend. And also at the same time, I want it to be able to work completely offline. And so if we have to do all these different hacking or like workarounds and hacks to make this work, then it just makes the whole experience less realistic. So that's when I went on the hunt for something, and I found Mirage.js, which I'm sure you'd love to talk about that a little bit, but they basically were doing exactly what I was doing, just reassigning window.fetch and then doing logs in the console. So that you still couldn't see network tab stuff. And then I finally stumbled upon MSW, and it was like, this is exactly what I need. I still get the network tab. It's just using Service Worker that just install the thing and boom, it's there. And the API is, honestly, the API took a little getting used to, but I got used to it. Now I love it, and I think it's great. Yeah, and now here we are, and I'm using MSW for everything. And I've completely switched over, like, don't mock window.fetch for your tests, use MSW instead. And that has just been awesome. So anyway, that's my story of finding MSW, and hopefully that like gets everybody in the right frame of reference for like why MSW is so awesome. I'd love to hear your story of why MSW came to be, and yeah, what it really is.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm really thankful, and I'm lucky that my dear friend recommended the library to you. So how it all started, I think about 2.5 years ago, I was working, I was just doing React as usual, and we were doing some API mocking at work. And I guess we used JSON 7, but there were a lot of cases when that didn't work in our particular setup. So people were discussing this a lot, and this was in the air. And I remember that one of my colleagues put down their own solution, which was great, but I was still like not fully satisfied with it. I thought it can be much better. So what I thought is that, what if I take this idea and I try to make it as perfect as I can, like in my mind. So I asked myself, what is the perfect API mocking? And well, I thought it'd be cool if we didn't have to have any actual servers. We didn't have to change any code. So like writing stuff like, if we're on test, then hit this endpoint, otherwise hit production. Like this was really tedious to maintain, I don't know. And it would be nice if my requests were somehow like actually made. So again, not like stopped and not like silenced, if this makes sense, in the app. So I did some research, and at first, surely it seemed like something impossible, but it was all right. I was reading on the web, and I found a concept of service worker. I didn't use it back then at all. I think I heard it a few times, like a buzzword somewhere on forums, but haven't tried it yet. And I thought like, hey, this may work, because as I understood it back then, it can intercept requests. Like that's awesome. That's what I want. And I put down a small demo, didn't show it to anybody. It was like a side project, still open sourced. And I guess the first attempt to do that was like 100 lines long library, which had a lot of issues, wasn't really usable, but it still had like this main part working. Like I was able to make a request, intercept it, and mock it, which was good. And then I thought, well, hey, my job here is done. Let's move on. I occasionally visited the repo just to do some maintenance, update things. I had some ideas in mind, but as usual, I don't know, I just postponed it for something more important. And it was going like this for years until I wake up one morning and I see that you're tweeting something about me, and I'm like, what? Okay, something happened overnight. And I check the history of messages, and I see that my friend Ruhais recommended this project of mine, which I don't even know if it was called MSW back then. Probably, yeah, probably it was already. And yeah, I thought like, I had exactly two thoughts. First of all, wow, this is cool. Second of all, oh my God, I need to redo it right now. Because if anybody sees that, it's going to be just shame. Um, yeah, so then it's been crazy couple of months just getting feedback from you, getting feedback from some other people, trying to use it, like creating some issues and so on. And yeah, I guess during this time it changed dramatically. Like it's probably almost a different library right now. It still has the like the heart and an idea, but a lot of things were rewritten. I think it was ported to TypeScript. There was a lot of stuff handled on the service worker side because, as people may know, that it's like not that suitable for API mocking. It has some limitations, and yeah, we did quite a few tasks to overcome those. So people who use it for mocking actually can just use it and forget about all this stuff under the hood. Yeah, and I guess that was it. It was really productive couple of months. I've been excited communicating with you, with others. It's been my biggest open source project, which is awesome. I've been open sourcing stuff for a couple of years, and it was mainly for myself. And I was a little bit burned out by daytime, and just like thought maybe I should just drop this thing. But then, yeah, this happens, and you never know.
Well, I'm so glad you stuck with it because it's just been fantastic. I think one of the things that I loved most about it was I actually had been considering writing my own service worker to manage this, to solve this problem. Because before I had my own window.fetch reassignment thing, and I was like, maybe I'll just move all that into a service worker. But there's like service workers are hard. It's like it's so easy to mess up service workers. And one thing that I loved about MSW was the architecture decision that you made to say the service worker is a pretty like relatively simple file by itself, and it's only updated like once. Anytime there's like a major update, then I have to run a little script, which is no big deal. But so it just like is sitting there, and then all of my code that I write to interact with MSW is actually within the context of my application, which I think was just a brilliant architectural decision because that gives me like I don't have to worry about the service worker getting out of date or anything. I just make a change to my server handlers and whatever, and then it just happens instantly, just like the rest of my application does. So that was a great, like brilliant decision there. And then you added the ability for testing, to use those same server handlers for testing. And that seriously, that was an enormous positive impact on my productivity. So good calls, both of those.
Thank you.
So yeah, like why don't you talk a little bit about the challenges that you faced with the service worker? Because you mentioned that service workers aren't actually super well suited for API mocking. So what are some of the challenges that you faced getting MSW working through service workers?
I think one of the first challenges there is to how to transfer data. So basically, internally, there's two parts to the library. There's a service worker, and there is like a client-side library that lives in your code, as you described. So, and these two parts need to speak to each other. So when request happens, worker catches the request, it needs to somehow return a mock response. So to do that, it needs to signal to the client that, hey, this happened, do something about it. And then client should resolve this request against your mock definitions, your request handlers, and should somehow tell the worker back that, hey, use this as the actual response. And I remember it was quite hard at the beginning, mainly as you cannot transfer a lot of data between service worker and client. You can transfer only text, because I had original idea that I would execute this request handlers in the worker, but they will be defined on the client. So I somehow pass the reference, call it there, and it's gonna work. But obviously it didn't, and never stringify functions. Thank me later. And then I was just reading some stuff on how workers operate, like what are the APIs there, because apart from like activating, installing, updating, and intercepting requests, there's also a few things you can do. Like I didn't know that you can do like communication between worker and client, like something similar to like inter-process communication, where you can send signals and you can receive signals, which was good. And I started digging into that, and I found out that you can also send some data, like you can send some strings. And that probably was the moment when I realized that, hey, this is very cool. This may work. I was really excited about that. It felt like cheating. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't know about this possibility, and then suddenly I was able to do exactly what I needed in some minimal way, of course.
Mm.
And that's probably what defined the architecture. Like I wasn't that experienced with service workers to like draw some conclusions like, hey, this should execute here and this should be signaled there. So I was trying to break service workers so it suits my need. And I guess the spec was very good. So it like guided me towards right decisions. So in the end, it was just a logic that would stringify some information about the request and send it to the client, and the client will do all the heavy lifting and again just send the stringified response back, because yeah, that's all strings and you didn't have to pass any kind of hacky JavaScript around. Yeah, that was quite interesting at the beginning. And then it was a lot of things during our cooperation, like I guess there was some issues that you need to update the worker on reload if you did some changes. And for some time, it was really annoying because sometimes you like this doesn't come enabled in browsers. Like you need to check it in the browser. Basically, there's like it's not a code feature, and like asking to check it felt like a huge prerequisite to have. Plus, it behaves a little different in different browsers. I'm not even sure if some browsers have this option.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember how exactly I solved that, but I guess it came to the concept of self-updating worker or something, like that it could, like the library could trigger an update event, like it could listen to update event. And then if update happened, it could just, I guess, reinstall the worker or update it on the fly. So you didn't have to have it enabled in the browser or anywhere. Yeah. And one of the recent challenges we faced just this week is that there's been an update in Chrome and perhaps some other browsers that kills service worker if it stays inactive for some period of time. So after like 20-30 minutes, if you're just I don't know, switched from your app doing some other stuff and you come back to the application, like everything can just stop working, the request would fail. It was a bummer. But
yeah,
yeah,
that seems like a pretty significant change. I'm sure it's impacting a lot of people now.
Yeah, it's like people raised some issues, and thankfully one of our contributors went in and did some research and resolved it. And I believe that we published a fix today, so it should be very good now.
Oh, great, good. I'll make sure to go update everything. Thank you for managing that for me. Because like if I'd done that myself, I would have had to do all that research. This is the beauty of open source. So thank you, and that contributor. Yeah, there. Like I recall also having service workers hang around. Like I would have one workshop that used the service worker and then another one that didn't. So I'd close this one and then I'd start this other one up and I'd still have the old workshop. And you solved that too. Well, how did you do that?
Yeah, I think the root cause of the issue was that when you register service worker, it controls what is called clients. You can imagine it like browser tabs, because I believe that is a client. So, and it controls them by their URL. So if you have different projects on the same URLs, you may want like really unexpected behavior, like mocking, kicking in when you don't want it. And I think it was solved by the check on the client side that like the mock service worker no, I think it was solved by explicitly like removing the worker when you close the tabs. So basically, when your last client closes, the worker understands that, and it can like self-destruct itself. And then you don't have this issue because if you go to another project on the same address and it doesn't have MSW, there is nothing to register the worker, which is good, because otherwise they persist between like sessions and so on, and you don't really want that in most cases. Like you want that in case of caching, which worker is designed to do, but in API, well, that may be not the best thing to have.
Yeah, precisely. Honestly, like there's part of this, it's like we're definitely using this API for what it's not intended for. And so there's some workarounds and things, but I'm like, at this point, it is really solid. And I have total confidence in MSW. So it's been remarkable what you've been able to accomplish with that. Another thing that I was curious or I wanted to ask you about was anytime that I've gone into MSW's code base to like research whatever, I found your test suite is really good. And the like testing service workers is something I don't have experience with. I've never done that. And so yeah, I'm really surprised at the thoroughness of your test suite, and I'm curious how you accomplish that. I see stuff with Puppeteer and things, but how do you get that that like if I were to build this myself without diving into deep research, I'd probably just try to break up the library into small chunks that I could just unit test and then like pray that they integrate okay. So I'm curious how you get like such good confidence from your tests of service workers.
Well, I still have it split into small chunks, and there are a bunch of unit tests, of course. But then, like I've been reading a lot of materials about testing, as well as some articles you put up, which is really awesome. And I just decided that the only true way to test that it works is to be as close to what actual developer does. And what they do, they open the browser, they load some JavaScript registers the worker, then they do some, I don't know, interactions, they do requests, and so on. So I guess it was just, I don't know, natural to try to spawn some browser during the tests and try to register the worker and so on. And it surprisingly was not that bad. I chose Puppeteer. I was considering also Cypress for that. But at that time, I chose Puppeteer because it allowed me to control network, like really to the way I wanted. Like you can set up your own interception in Puppeteer, but what was needed for the test is for like have full control in listening to actual requests that happen, actual response that you received. You can get all the headers and stuff, and you can do it like on the Chrome level, if it makes sense. So it's not your app doing this. It's like Puppeteer somehow, I mean, communicating with Chrome, and Chrome lets you know like, hey, this has happened. And it was quite nice. And then I was just sitting one evening and thinking, how can I make it better? I really love the idea when my test suite is also a usage example. I've been trying to practice this for multiple projects, and here it applied pretty good as well. So what I did is that I created like small test suites, which had probably nothing related to test, but they were like a usage example. And it's a regular JavaScript module where you import stuff, you do some actions and stuff like that. And then I created some setup code, like some environment that can pull this code in, create a dev server, then make Puppeteer open this dev server, and then serve MSW, like the current build you have, and it would just work. Yeah, and it's been really, really useful. Like we had some issues with like the Webpack dev server, just we configured it wrong, and then it took some time to figure it out right, so there's no like memory leaks and so on. Yeah.
Well, I think it takes everybody time to get anything to work with Webpack. This is why I'm so glad we have you know these frameworks now that like encapsulate Webpack. But anytime you have to dive in, that's a trick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So and your Puppeteer tests are they like running in your own little node script that you've created, or is that part of Jest? Like where I can't remember whether you have this all running within Jest or not.
Let me remember myself. Okay, yeah, so how it works, yeah, it runs with Jest, and then I have a custom command, like a setup command that accepts the path to this use case. And what it does, it spawns Puppeteer, it spawns dev server, it orchestrates like their communication if needed, allows to close them all after tests are done. And you call it in before all or before each in each like test suite. And what it does, it just runs the test. It sees that it needs to spawn the browser. It spawns the browser. It communicates with the dev server. So it basically opens it like an app in this browser. And then it does whatever interactions you need to do. So usually I just perform requests from within Puppeteer context, and then I see what happened to that request.
Yeah, that's cool. Awesome. So another, I'd like to take a little bit of a step back and just ask kind of what your thoughts are around API mocking, as well, like for both our development experience as well as our testing. So why do you think it's so useful to do this? Like you mentioned earlier that you don't want to have code in your application that says hit this in development and this in production or whatever. And that makes sense to me. But why is MSW a good choice for mocking it? And maybe even to take it even further, why should we even do mocking? Why can't we just hit the production server or maybe a staging server? Like, what's the benefit of mocking at all?
Well, yeah, there is a lot of levels where you can apply mocks, like from mocking specific modules to mocking API requests. When it comes to mocking, I tend to think that, well, if you can avoid it. If you can construct your, I don't know, function, your component, your part of the app, the way that would maybe allow you to test it without doing mocks, it would be really great. But for some things, you clearly can't, like when you do a HTTP request in your app, well, like it needs to happen. That's the part of functionality. So if you omit it, you will be losing, like you will be testing a different code effectively. It's not going to be your app code. It will be like a little bit altered code, which gives you much less confidence, I suppose. But what really shines for me and where I see MSW really useful is that when you apply it in tests, you kind of have this invisible layer on top, and this layer is part of your test, not your app, because you can set up it the way that your app will not even know anything about MSW at all. And it would be really great because like if you have two different parts, your app and mocks, and you need to try really hard to like make code leak from one part to another, you would end up with more like strict tests. So your app will not do something it shouldn't do, like rewrite fetch or XML HTTP requests globally. And your mocks will also try to behave like an actual server. So maybe, I don't know, perhaps there is some limitation here as well. And I guess that's the main benefit to be there, because if you create these deviations, as I said, for the sake of testing or for the sake of development, it may work, but at some point it may get either expensive to maintain, or perhaps it will get it would get some like false positive results sometimes. It depends. I'm not a fan of stubbing things, although MSW does do a few stubbing things when it runs a node, so to be clear. But still, I feel like if we can do it somehow without touching actual code or even the standard library, it would be amazing. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I think that is like a good idea to try and avoid stubbing things, so that the code at least is running as close to the way that it actually runs as possible. And I agree with you that there are just some situations where you can't avoid mocking. Like you wouldn't want to actually charge your credit card when you check out, during tests or something, or even during development. But I think having MSW as a solution can help us sidestep some of the issues that come with mocking, because the way that it's implemented. And it can, at least for me, it really speeds up the development time, like my productivity, which is just so nice. Like the ability to be able to work completely offline. I remember when I worked at, well, I was going to use PayPal as an example, but pretty much everywhere I've worked, when you're doing development, you didn't run the entire app on your local machine. You would hit a staging server or something. And if that staging server ever went down, then you're like, you can't work. And so, yeah, I would really have appreciated having MSW. And then to take it a step further, I know a lot of people really like JSON server or something like that for a mock server. What would you say are some of the benefits of using MSW over like hosting a mock server locally?
Well, like initially, if you host another server, It comes with the cost of having to run the server, potentially maintain it sometimes. Like it's basically a real server which you just downgrade to be an API mocking server, and it may be suitable. It definitely has some usage scenarios. Like if I don't know, I don't see anything bad in that particularly. But if you want to do it like a regular basis, especially if you want to integrate it with tests, it may be really costly to spawn the server each time, clean it up. I don't know. It's just it depends on you. I would personally try to keep my testing setup like as easy as possible. So like spawning another server maybe not that's a good decision for me. And then yeah, I guess the biggest advantage is that if you have a dedicated API server, well, something in your code needs to hit it at some point of time. So if you just keep speaking with your some stage server or production, it's not going to happen. So you effectively go and you change your code, which I'm trying to set like a taboo for mocking. Like you shouldn't change your code for the sake of mocking, and even for the sake of testing. Of course, it comes with like extremities, but that's a really nice thing to have like a guidance. And I like when tools encourage you to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Love it. Well, this has been a great conversation. I had a good time. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to make sure we cover?
I think it's all right. I just would like to give a huge round of thanks to everybody who contributed, including you, first of all, and a lot of other people who raised issues, suggested features, tried it, most importantly. And I'm really happy to the state we got the library to. Like, yeah, that's just awesome. Yeah.
That's good. And hopefully at this point, there's not a whole lot more that needs to be done that will take you a whole lot of your personal time, because I know you're not necessarily using this at work, and so this is your personal time. So we really appreciate your personal time, and hopefully we can get more contributors to help take care of other things, like when Chrome decides to to delete the service worker after 20 minutes of non-use or whatever. So yes, thank you so much for all of that effort and work that you do. It's seriously made me a more productive engineer. Being able to use those handlers during development and tests. If I have a storybook, I just don't need to worry about any of this stuff. I just have it all set up in one place, and it works brilliantly. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm really happy.
Okay, cool. Thanks everyone. We'll see y'all later.
Yep. Take care.